My name is Mark, and up until a Tuesday night a few months ago, I thought I had a decent life. Not an exciting life, maybe, but a decent one. We had the small apartment in Denver, the one with the creaky floors and the balcony that always faced the sun, perfect for Sunday coffee. We both had jobs. I was working in logistics, grinding away, saving up for that eventual jump to a place with an actual garage. Ashley, my wife, she was climbing the corporate ladder at Stratosphere Group, a high-end consulting firm downtown. Dual incomes, shared groceries, terrible reality TV on Friday nights. Simple things. Real things. Or so I thought. The flicker. It was just after 10. I was walking to the kitchen, barefoot, mind half asleep, and already mentally preparing for the next day's grind, when I saw it. Ashley had left her laptop open on the counter. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the soft, cold glow emanating from the screen. Like I said, I was half asleep. I was going for water. I had no intention of snooping. But something on the screen snagged my attention, pulling me up short. An email. The subject line was big and bold. You're invited. Stratosphere Group Executive Celebration. Friday, 7 p.m. formal attire required. My pulse started ticking up. That slow, heavy thud you feel in your ears when you know you're about to discover something you wish you could unsee. I leaned in, drawn into the blue light of the betrayal. I saw the RSVP list, a handful of names, and right there, nestled in the middle, was hers. Ashley Kenner, senior consultant. I scrolled down quickly. Champagne reception. Rooftop venue downtown. Hosted by Richard Evans. Richard Evans. The name didn't just register. It slammed into me. Richard Evans was her boss. Her mentor. The man whose brilliance and humility she constantly praised. The man who was leading her fast track to the top. And she hadn't said a word. She always told me everything. Every boring staff meeting. Every argument with a receptionist. Every detail. From the color of the Post-it notes to the frustratingly long wait at the coffee shop. She never forgot to mention things like this. A formal executive celebration. Something that would require a new dress, a dry clean suit, a clear schedule. Something that screamed importance. My throat felt tight. I straightened up, backing away from the screen as if it might burn me. I didn't need simple anymore. I needed truth. The confrontation. I heard the soft pad of her footsteps behind me before she spoke. She'd probably just finished her nightly routine, her hair smelling of expensive conditioner, her skin smooth and cool. The normal, routine Ashley. You're up, she said. Her voice was too casual, one notch too bright for a Tuesday night. I turned the screen toward her, letting the cold light illuminate the invitation. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Ashley froze. Not the theatrical freezing of someone caught in a lie, but the subtle microsecond paralysis of a cornered animal calculating its escape route. It was the lack of natural surprise that spoke volumes. She recovered instantly, giving a half shrug, half smile, like I had just asked about a dentist appointment. Oh, that? Just a dumb work party. I didn't think it mattered. My pulse ticked faster, moving from a thud to a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. When will you even tell me about it, Ash? I asked, my voice dangerously low and even. I kept the tone flat, refusing to give her the drama she craved, the rage she could easily dismiss. She crossed her arms, defensive instantly. Mark, come on. These things are awful. It's just schmoozing and small talk. You'd hate it. I took a slow breath, tasting the metallic fear that was suddenly coating my tongue. And that's your decision to make for me? Ashley tilted her head, the annoyance I knew so well flashing behind her eyes. It was the look she gave me when I questioned her logic or pushed back on her plans. You're twisting this into something it's not. Then explain it. I said, my voice steady, deliberate. Explain why you're hiding it. I'm not hiding anything, she snapped, raising her voice, hoping the sudden escalation would distract me. It's just a boring party. Why are you acting like I've committed a crime? Because you didn't mention it at all. I shot back, equally calm. Not once. And you never forget to mention things like this. She took a sharp breath. Well, maybe I didn't feel like dragging my husband to a work event where you'd stand in the corner judging everyone. The accusation was sharp, calculated to hit my insecurities about my own less glamorous job. It was a deflection, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I took a step forward, inching into her comfort zone. My movement was slow, deliberate. Or maybe, I said, leaning in, letting her see the cold clarity in my eyes, you didn't want me there because someone else already thinks he's your date. That hit. Hard. Her mouth opened and shut. The composure she'd carefully constructed over the past minute cracked just enough to show something raw and panicked underneath. For a terrible, revealing second, she couldn't speak. "You're being ridiculous," she said, her voice dropping to a low, warning hiss. "I've told you Richard is my boss. That's it. You also told me you'd be working late twice this week." I countered, my mind racing now, piecing together the last few confusing days. Now I see where that time went. Ashley's face flushed a deep, furious red. "Do you hear yourself? This is insane, Mark. You're spinning out because of a party invite." "No," I said quietly, the denial shaking me more than a lie. "I'm reacting to how fast you're spinning away from me." She backed up a step, as if my words had physical weight. "You're jealous," she accused. "That's all this is. You can't handle that I finally have a career that matters." I almost laughed, the absurdity of her deflection hitting me. "What I can't handle is dishonesty. And lately, that's been your full-time job." Her face changed. It went thin, tight-cornered. She knew she was exposed. "Don't you dare accuse me of that," she said, her voice laced with venom. "Not after I spent years supporting your ups and downs." "Don't change the subject," I demanded, ignoring the low blow. "I'll be at that party." She blinked. "What?" I said I'll be there Friday. I repeated, my resolve hardening with every word. "Black suit. I'll even smile for the camera." "No," she said sharply. Not a suggestion, not a plea, but a demand. "You can't, Mark. Don't come." And there it was, the final, damning piece of evidence. The demand. You don't demand your husband stay home unless his presence jeopardizes something you're trying to hide. I held her gaze, feeling the last vestiges of our simple life crumble into dust. "You don't want me there because you know something's going on, and you're terrified I'll see it." Ashley turned away, walking quickly into the hallway, but not before I caught the final, fleeting look on her face. It wasn't guilt and it wasn't fear. It was control slipping through her fingers. She didn't slam the door, but I almost wished she had. It would have been more honest than the absolute, smothering silence she left behind. I stood there for a long time, the glow from the laptop still illuminating that invitation. I need the truth. I need to look my wife in the eye and see something real again. Because right now, I see a stranger, one hiding something she's terrified I'll discover. And I will. I didn't know how, but I knew I would expose the lie. I had to, even if it meant destroying everything we had. Because living in this beautiful, simple lie was no longer an option. This was the moment I realized that in the wide, complicated world of our marriage, I was desperately trying to find the one small, focused area, the niche where the truth resided, and I was going to push everything else aside to get to it. The venue looked exactly like it belonged in a movie. A high-rise rooftop space downtown, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, showing the sprawl of Denver lights below. Marble floors that reflected the crystal chandeliers, catching and fracturing the light into 1,000 cold shards. There was just enough ambient jazz to make everyone feel more important than they probably were. The music a soft, expensive shield against reality. The Stratosphere group certainly knew how to throw a party, and I knew how to observe one. I arrived 10 minutes after Ashley. I had told her I'd meet her there, and she didn't argue, just said fine in that clipped, controlled tone that told me she didn't believe I would really show up. But I did. I watched her before she saw me. She stood near the bar, flanked by sleek suits and women in designer smiles. She was sipping champagne like she needed it more than she wanted. The glass already half empty. Her laughter, too light, too quick, rose above the music. She was playing the part of the rising star perfectly, all energy and polished poise. Then she spotted me. The evasion. A flicker passed across her face. Not recognition. Not joy. It was almost like fear, but it was gone too fast to catch twice. She regained that tight, stretched-out smile and walked over, moving to the crowd with practiced ease. "You came," she said, the words slightly brittle. She reached out and brushed an imaginary limb from my lapel, a gesture of ownership designed entirely for external consumption. I said I would. I replied, keeping my voice level. "You didn't have to," she insisted. "I know." I waited, hoped she'd introduce me to someone, anyone, but she didn't. Her eyes darted past me, scanning the room like she was waiting for a fire alarm or perhaps a cue. "You want something to drink?" she asked, already turning toward the bar, making my presence an afterthought. I followed her, watching her refill her glass without asking what I wanted. Around us, laughter bubbled like the champagne, everything polished and surface level. But underneath the smooth jazz and glossy smiles, something was off. She barely made eye contact. Her conversation bounced from topic to topic like a marble on glass, kinetic but directionless. And every few minutes, her gaze flicked toward a tall, gray suit by the catering table. Richard. I didn't need an introduction. I recognized him from the photos she once showed me when she landed the job. Her mentor, her champion. He looked anything but humble now, surrounded by a cluster of junior employees hanging on his every word. Ashley kept glancing his way, like she was timing something, or perhaps waiting for permission. So that's him, I said, casually gesturing with my chin. She blinked. Who? Your boss. Richard. Oh, yeah. She took a long sip of her champagne. He's over there. Silence. The sound of her avoidance was deafening. Want to meet him? I asked, pushing gently. Do you want me to? She countered, still refusing to look at me. She hesitated. It's not really that kind of thing. He's busy. Too busy to meet the husband of his rising star. Her grip tightened around the stem of her glass. Let's just enjoy the night, okay? That's when I knew. Whatever this was, whoever he was to her, it wasn't just professional. You don't hide someone unless there's something to hide. I was standing there looking at the surface, and my instincts were screaming about the rot underneath. I was looking for the niche of truth, and she was guarding it fiercely. We made our way to a corner table. Ashley kept smiling at people walking by, but she never waved anyone over. I was invisible, a prop, a placeholder for a role she hadn't wanted filled tonight. The champagne wasn't helping her control. Her voice got higher, her laugh louder, her small talk more manic. At one point, someone asked where she'd been hiding this handsome guy, and she brushed it off with a joke. Oh, he just escaped from the accounting department. She didn't say my name. She didn't say I was her husband. The burn started low in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the kind of quiet hurt that leaves a deep, quiet bruise. I leaned back, watching her chat with a woman in a red dress while still keeping half an eye on Richard. She was juggling two conversations in different rooms, and I wasn't in either one. The scapegoat. Are you okay? I asked, keeping my tone light, testing her composure. She turned, startled. Why wouldn't I be? You're drinking like you're trying to forget something. Her smile vanished. The control broke. Wow. Really? We're doing this here. You invited it, Ash. She leaned in, voice low and sharp. You said you behave. No, I said, calmly meeting her gaze. I said I'd come. She stood abruptly, smoothing her dress, and flashed a strange, fixed smile toward the room. I need air. And just like that, she walked off. I didn't follow. I just sat there alone at a table of polished professionals, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Something inside me whispered. This wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. The unexpected hand. A little after 9, the lights dimmed. The band picked up tempo, swapping jazz for something a bit more rhythmic, still elegant, but playful enough to loosen people's collars and coax them onto the dance floor. I stayed seated, watching. Ashley returned after her air break with a touch more makeup and a forced serenity that didn't fool me for a second. She sat beside me, hands clasped too tightly in her lap, eyes scanning the room. She hadn't looked at me once since she came back. Then it happened. She spotted Richard heading toward the floor with a group of execs, and without a word, no glance, no signal, she stood, walked straight to him, touched his arm lightly, and slid into the groove of the music like she belonged there. He didn't look surprised. I stayed where I was, but something in my chest flinched. She laughed at something he said. Too loud, too bright. Her hand lingered on his shoulder. I knew Ashley. That wasn't business laughter. That was show. I watched them move together. It wasn't a romantic dance, not in the overt sense, but the familiarity between them was sharp enough to slice through the champagne haze. It was how her body leaned closer than it needed to, how he whispered low, and she threw her head back like he'd said something wickedly clever, and then a voice cut through the fog beside me. If you're free, take me. I turned. She stood there with a confidence that didn't match the reserved tone of the party, a brunette with dark curls, a soft smirk, and eyes that knew too much. Sorry. I asked. She extended a hand, mock formal. Julia, I work with your wife. I raised an eyebrow. And this is how you network. She smiled. Just trying to rescue a man from his own funeral. You look like you needed saving. I stared at her for a second, then looked back at the dance floor, at Ashley, now pressed closer to Richard than she'd ever danced with me in public. Then I stood, took Julia's hand, and stepped onto the floor. Ashley noticed us before we even hit the beat. She froze, not obviously, but enough. Her laugh stuttered. Her posture straightened. She said something to Richard, then turned and walked across the floor toward us. Julia whispered without looking at me, 30 seconds? Ashley appeared beside us, all syrup and urgency. Mark, she said, her smile stretched so tight it could snap. Hey, could I talk to you for a sec? I didn't stop moving. We're dancing, Julia added coolly. Don't worry, I'm keeping him safe. Ashley's glare was potent. It's important. I finally looked at her. Then it can wait. And I turned back to Julia as we spun slowly across the room. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt awake. Ashley had just seen something she hadn't expected. For once, I wasn't waiting in the wings. I was on stage, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure what act came next. This was the first small movement in my pursuit of the hidden truth. The music slowed, shifting from rhythmic jazz to something quieter, measured. Enough that you could hear the floor creak faintly under polished shoes. Enough that conversation dropped to murmurs and eyes turned inward. Julia didn't try to lead the dance. She just let her hands rest lightly in mine, her touch measured, intentional. It wasn't flirtatious. It was careful, like someone guiding you towards something you didn't want to see. I hope that wasn't too much, she said softly, her lips barely moving against the music. I met her eyes. What do you mean? That line earlier, about dancing with me. I shrugged. It worked. She chuckled, then glanced toward Ashley. My wife had retreated to the far end of the room with a glass of something golden in her grip. She looked still, but I knew that stillness. It was coiled, braced, waiting. I've known Ashley a long time, Julia said, her voice quieter now, confiding. We weren't always close. But the last year, things shifted. Shifted how? Julia leaned in, not touching me, but close enough to make it look like she was whispering something romantic. There are rumors, she said. I stiffened imperceptibly. She felt it. She went on, carefully, about her and Richard. His name hits differently now. I'd said it earlier with suspicion. She said it like a surgeon naming the tumor she was about to cut out. Rumors. I echoed, my voice steady, refusing to break. Julia tilted her head slightly. Late nights, unscheduled offsites. Her calendar gets blurry. People talk. I don't traffic in gossip, Mark, but I also don't ignore smoke. The rhythm of the dance didn't change, but something under my skin did. I didn't flinch, didn't ask for proof. I just looked across the room at Ashley, smiling again, overly wide, laughing too loudly, her glass now empty, and then back at Julia. Why are you telling me this? Her eyes met mine. Because you didn't look surprised when I said it. That stopped me. I what? You look like someone who's known for a while, but hasn't had the words for it. I stared at her. She wasn't wrong. There's a particular ache in knowing something before you're ready to admit it, before you let yourself name it. We swayed in silence for a few seconds more. She's not stupid, Julia added. She saw us dancing. She'll retaliate. I smiled faintly. Let her. The music shifted again, a final chord drifting out like a held breath. I stepped back, letting go of Julia's hand. Thanks, I said. For the dance? She asked. For the clarity. She nodded once, then turned back into the crowd. And me? I stood at the edge of that polished dance floor, heartbeat calm, thoughts sharp as glass. Rumors, whispers, calendars that didn't add up. I wasn't angry yet, but I was something close. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to put out a fire. I was watching where the smoke would lead. The transaction. The cafe was quiet. One of those places where the music is soft and the wood tables are always slightly sticky, no matter how many times they're wiped. Vince, the private investigator, liked places like this. Unpretentious, private, easy to disappear in. He slid into the booth across from me, dressed like someone who wanted to blend in with the furniture. Beige jacket, beige slacks, expression unreadable. You said it was urgent, he said. No small talk. It is. I handed him a folded sheet of paper. Her name's Ashley. This is her schedule, or what she tells me it is. Office, gym, store. Rinse. Repeat. Vince studied it with the same care you give a blueprint of a building you were about to break into. Spouse, he asked. I nodded. My wife. You suspect cheating? I exhaled through my nose. I suspect something. I'm not jumping to conclusions, but I need to know what I'm dealing with. I paused, clarify my objective, finding my niche of truth. You're not looking for a smoking gun, Vince. You're looking for a pattern. For the moment she steps out of line, she drew for me. Vince didn't blink. You want photos? No, just truth. He gave a small nod, tucking the paper into his jacket. You'll get it. 2 weeks. I slid an envelope across the table. This covered the fee. It was the money we had earmarked for the down payment on the new place, the place with the garage. Now, that money was buying me certainty. It was an investment in the niche of honesty, which was far more valuable than a house built on lies. Vince picked it up, didn't bother checking contents. I'll be in touch. And just like that, he was gone. I sat there a while longer, nursing a lukewarm coffee and wondering what it said about me that I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't chasing a gotcha moment. I was just tired of feeling like the last person in the room to know what was actually going on in his own life. The performance. That night at home, things were different. Ashley was in the kitchen when I walked in, early, for once. She had music playing, not her usual playlist, something upbeat, too cheerful. She was wearing an apron I hadn't seen in months, humming like a sitcom character, trying to distract the audience from the chaos backstage. Hey, she called out, turning with a beaming smile. You're home early. Yeah, I said, setting down my keys. Thought I'd surprise you, she chirped. Well, surprise. You're just in time for dinner. I made that lemon chicken you like. I watched her move around the kitchen. Too fast, too animated. Every word out of her mouth was one notch louder than usual. She was smiling too much, laughing too quickly, complimenting me in ways that didn't fit the moment. You look really good lately, by the way, she said as she set a plate down. New cologne. No, same stuff. She nodded too hard. Well, it's working. We ate in a strange rhythm, her talking, me listening, her smiling, me watching. Halfway through dinner, I launched my own test, casually. You've been really happy lately. She froze, just for a breath. What do you mean? I don't know. You just seem lighter, like something changed. Ashley laughed, too high-pitched. Oh my God! Are you saying I've been in a bad mood before? Didn't say that. She twirled her fork, eyes still not meeting mine. Maybe I'm just trying harder. Trying harder? She shrugged. You said I've seemed off, remember? Maybe I just wanted to be better. I leaned back, watching her closely, analyzing her performance. You've never cared what I thought about your mood before. Ashley faltered for just a second, then smiled again, this time slower, more seductive. Well, maybe I do now. And there it was, too smooth, too rehearsed. Ashley wasn't trying to fix things. She was laying down breadcrumbs, hoping I'd follow them in the wrong direction. She thought I was pulling away, and now she was trying to lure me back with a sudden, excessive display of domesticity. It almost worked. Almost. But I knew better. I had hired Vince to look for the lie, but I was finding a profound, disturbing truth right here at the kitchen table. And that truth was going to cost us everything. 2 weeks went by slower than I expected. It's strange how long a day can feel when you're watching someone too closely, when every word, every movement, every moment feels like a possible clue. Ashley had settled into this new version of herself. Too accommodating, too sweet. She made dinner most nights now. She asked about my day like she really wanted to know. She even laughed at my old jokes, the ones she used to roll her eyes at. And yet, all of it felt thin, like a set built quickly, real from the outside, hollow underneath. I was living with an actress, and her performance was flawless. My stress wasn't from anger. It was from being stuck. I was waiting for Vince, waiting for the definitive answer that would let me move forward or, impossibly, move back. Every time Ashley smiled, I wondered if it was a genuine gesture of affection or a carefully placed piece of stage dressing designed to throw me off the trail. This perpetual uncertainty was far more exhausting than a single, loud fight. The unmarked door. On Friday afternoon, I walked into Vince's office, downtown, on the 3rd floor of a building no one ever notices. No receptionist, just a hallway that smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. It was a physical embodiment of a non-place, exactly the kind of anonymity Vince cultivated. He opened the door before I knocked. Mark, he said, voice flat as ever. Come in. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Metal filing cabinets, leather chairs that creaked too loud, a desk with nothing personal on it. He sat down, slid a thin manila folder toward me. Went through everything, he said. Followed her most days. She keeps a tight routine. Office, grocery store, occasionally the gym. One lunch with a female coworker, one late work night, but she stayed inside the building the whole time. I flipped through the photos. Blurry shots of Ashley walking through parking lots, buying celery, standing in line at a coffee shop. The absolute mundanity of it made something inside me sink. No contact with Richard outside of the office? I asked. None that I could see. She's careful. Vince gave a slow nod. If she's hiding something, she's burying it deep, but I didn't find anything I could call suspicious. No second phone, no detours, no clandestine meetings. I closed the folder. The crisp sound of the cardboard snapping shut sounded like finality. So, she's either clean, I said, my voice heavy with the disappointment I hadn't expected to feel, or she's smarter than most. He wasn't saying it to be cruel, just honest. Or you're looking for a truth that doesn't leave physical footprints. I left the office feeling heavier than when I went in. The report hadn't cleared her. It hadn't condemned her, either. It had left me nowhere. I was standing in the middle of a bridge that might not even be real. I couldn't go back, couldn't move forward, just stuck in the agonizing limbo of informed suspicion. The taste of relief. That night, Ashley was making pancakes for dinner. Felt like doing something fun, she said, spinning in sock feet across the tile. Breakfast at night. That used to be your thing, remember? I nodded, trying to smile. She was glowing. Not with joy. No, this wasn't joy. This was palpable, undeniable relief. Like someone who just passed a difficult, unscheduled test and was now convinced the machine was broken. She poured me coffee. You okay? You've been kind of quiet lately. I've just had a lot on my mind. Work. I looked at her carefully. Something like that. She smiled, reaching across the table and placing her hand over mine. You can talk to me, you know. Could I? Because that's what made this worse. The report hadn't cleared her, but the surveillance had definitely ended. She felt safe again. And the timing of her immediate, obvious relief. The celebratory pancakes, the genuine warmth now that the 2-week threat window was closed, was all the evidence I needed. She knew she was being watched, or at least suspected she was about to be. You're right. I'm here. I gave her a soft smile. But I wasn't. Every instinct I had was still screaming that something was off. That the truth wasn't the photos of celery and parking lots. It was in the glances, the small silences, the way she hesitated when I asked about her day, and overcompensated a second later. Vince hadn't found the niche I was looking for. I had defined the search parameters too narrowly. I was looking for physical infidelity, a trackable, external event. But the deeper, more profound betrayal wasn't physical. It was corporate. It was emotional. It was her prioritizing Richard's influence over my stability. That kind of rot doesn't show up on a PI's camera. It shows up in a blurred calendar entry or a conversation with a coworker. Vince had been looking from the outside. But there was still one person who hadn't lied to me yet, at least not directly. Julia, the one person who was already on the inside. The new direction. I sat on the couch after dinner, thinking, if I wanted the truth of the Stratosphere Group, the truth about Richard, the truth about the professional lines Ashley was blurring to climb the ladder, I needed a native guide. I needed someone willing to risk their own proximity to the center of the rot. I realized my mistake in defining the niche. I had been looking for a physical truth, but the real niche was a structural one, the hidden, specific area of corporate immorality and favoritism that Ashley was exploiting. I pulled out my phone. I still had Julia's number from the night of the party. She discreetly slipped me a card before I left. If she was willing to speak once, maybe she'd be willing to speak again. And if she was, I was ready to listen, because I was done watching the outside of the apartment. It was time to understand the inside of the corporation. The financial cost of the PI hadn't brought me the answer, but it had bought me the clarity to pivot. Now, the real cost, the risk to Julia, and the risk to my own emotional stability, was about to be tallied. I sent the text. Are you free this Saturday? The answer came back instantly. Yes, I think we need to talk. The wine bar sat quietly at the end of a block line with boutiques and overpriced stationery shops. One of those places with dim lighting, wall-length mirrors, and servers who knew when not to interrupt. It felt like the perfect spot to discuss an assassination, or in this case, a corporate suicide. Julia was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small corner table, swirling a glass of something red and expensive, outside the company setting. She looked different, less polished, more direct. There was no work badge around her neck, no corporate mask, just eyes that watched me with a strange intensity, like she'd been waiting longer than just a night. Mark, she said, nodding toward the seat across from her. Glad you came. Saturday. You said you had something. I slid into the booth. I didn't reach for the wine list. I wanted to stay absolutely clear. The private investigator came up with nothing. I told her, laying out the failure simply. No late-night trysts, no detours, no proof of physical cheating. Just photos of her buying celery and going to gym. She smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was confirmation. I'm not surprised. If Ashley is good at one thing, it's maintaining a facade. She's careful. You're saying you still believe something's going on? I'm saying I know it is. She set her glass down carefully. I don't deal in guesses. You were looking from the outside for a trackable event, but the rot is structural. It's the entire executive layer. There's politics, manipulation, cover-ups, and Richard, he's not just a bad boss. He's reckless. Ashley's close to him, Mark. Closer than most. I exhaled, but if Vince couldn't find anything... He's looking for physical evidence, she interrupted. I'm already inside. I see the meeting cancellations that coincide with Richard's unscheduled travel. I see the promotions given based on personal proximity, not merit. I see how Ashley moves in that ecosystem. It's a culture of indiscretion, and she's not a victim. She's a beneficiary. I studied her, absorbing the reality of my mistake. My original definition of the niche, the physical location of betrayal, was wrong. The true niche was a systemic moral decay she had embraced to advance her career. Why are you telling me this? I asked, looking directly into her eyes. It was the crucial question. Julia smiled again, this time slower, the corners of her eyes crinkling. Because you deserve to know the truth, not just a lie. And because I'm tired of watching the truth get buried. I'm tired of working under men like Richard. The place is poison, Mark. There was a pause. Something shifted in her face. The corporate mask dropped completely, revealing a raw resolve. Then she reached for her wine and said it. There's another way. I can expose it. All of it. I leaned in. What are you saying? She touched the rim of her glass, tracing it slowly, as if drawing a line in the sand. If I come forward, I blow the whistle. I can release documentation, meeting notes, communications that prove Richard's ethical violations and the toxic culture of favoritism that protected people like Ashley. My heart rate jumped. This was no longer about a marriage. This was corporate warfare. You're talking about legal risk. Destroying the firm's reputation. I'm talking about destroying mine, she corrected, her voice clear. If I come forward, I lose my job. I lose any future at that firm. I might even face legal pressure for exposing internal memos. But I'll do it because someone needs to tell the truth. I'm not afraid of fallout. There was something in her voice, not just resolve, but a fierce, almost desperate yearning for integrity. You're willing to destroy your career for this. I whispered, comprehending the weight of the sacrifice. Julia's smile was thin, almost grim. Maybe it needed burning anyway. Mark, I can give you clarity. I can prove that Ashley wasn't just emotionally straying. She traded her marriage and her honesty for a professional title in a company built on a swamp of lies. I can prove the niche of her betrayal. I didn't know what to say. The moral burden of accepting her sacrifice was immense. I was no longer seeking proof for a private divorce. I was facilitating a catastrophe that would end her entire professional life. But the clarity she offered, the final, undeniable truth, was worth any price. I was already ruined by the lie. I wouldn't stop at anything less than the full truth now. She reached across the table. Not far, not aggressively, just enough to let her fingers graze mine. It was a transfer of courage, a commitment between co-conspirators for the truth. It helps to know someone's listening, she said, her voice softer now. Someone who wants the truth as badly as I do. I didn't pull my hand away. Not right away. I just looked at her, accepting the shared burden. Then tell me everything. I said, my voice steady. Tell me exactly how we make this happen. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like movement again. Not escape, not closure, but irreversible, terrifying momentum. And momentum, when you've been stuck in a house of lies, feels dangerously close to hope. The decision was made. The past was about to become public knowledge. It was just after 9 when the first alert lit up my phone. I was on the couch, the lights low, half watching a documentary about deep-sea fishing, the kind of passive evening you fall into when your life feels too complicated to touch. The first alert was low-key, an email notification that I almost ignored. Then the second alert came. Then the third. By the fifth, I muted the TV and sat up straight. I picked up my phone, the screen blindingly bright in the dim room. Corporate misconduct allegations. Executive misuse of company funds. Internal investigation launched. The company name flashed again and again in bold print. Stratosphere Group. I scrolled down, my thumb shaking slightly. And in the third headline down, a name I hadn't expected to see this soon. Julia Briner, senior consultant, speaks out on alleged ethical violations. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. The article wasn't long, just a few quotes, carefully phrased, legally safe, but loaded with implication. Julia had named the culture toxic, unregulated, hostile. She hadn't pointed directly at Richard, but she'd held the flashlight just long enough for everyone to see the shape in the shadows. Beneath the lines, if you knew how to read them, there were clear references to personal entanglements, favoritism and promotional pathways, an atmosphere of silence maintained through subtle coercion. It didn't say Ashley's name, but it didn't need to. Her proximity to Richard and her rapid rise were now cast in the darkest possible light. I refreshed the news feed again. 3 more outlets had picked it up. One headline read, Insider Whistleblower Exposes Executive Secrets at Leading Consulting Firm. I clicked into the quotes. Reread the parts about leadership indiscretions, about blurred lines, about the unspoken pressure on junior staff to please those who held the reins. I could see Julia's face calm, poised, just as she looked at me across the quiet wine bar when she said, It needed burning anyway. I put my phone down and sat in silence. Not the anxious kind that buzzes around your chest. No, the silence was clean. It was a quiet that comes when you realize a truth you suspected has just been written into the world. Published, time-stamped, no longer just yours to carry. I glanced at the door. Ashley wasn't home yet. She'd sent a text around 6 o'clock. Might be back late. Richard's got us grinding out slides for Q4. Sorry, honey. That message felt like it was from another lifetime now. Richard's name was about to trend for all the wrong reasons. And Ashley's proximity to him was about to cost her more than she knew. The irony was devastating. All those days she moved around me like I was a question she didn't have time to answer. All those nights she curled up beside me acting like she had nothing to explain. Now she wouldn't have to explain it to me. She'd be explaining it to HR, to her legal team, to the media. Julia had lit the match. Now, the building was on fire. The reckoning. The door slammed. So violently one of the picture frames rattled against the wall. I didn't move. Ashley stood in the doorway, drenched from the cold October rain. Her expensive wool coat was plastered to her, mascara bleeding down her cheeks, her breath heaving like she'd run 5 blocks without stopping. You, she gasped. You set this up. She didn't even close the door. It swung open behind her like a stage curtain in some tragic play. I stayed seated on the couch, hands clasped, phone face down on the table in front of me, her headline still open in 6 tabs. Say something, she shouted, stumbling toward me. Tell me this isn't your doing. I didn't write the article. I said flatly, my voice control calm lethal, but you let her do it. Ashley jabbed a trembling finger toward me, her voice cracking with fury and panic. You fed her something. You had to. There's no way Julia would have known. I didn't feed her anything, I said calmly. She found her own courage. Something you lost a long time ago. Her face was contorted, the makeup streaming black lines toward her chin. She's lying. You know she's lying. Which part? I asked, still seated. The part about the affairs, or the part where Richard used his position to elevate people he was sleeping with. Ashley flinched. You think I slept with him? I know something happened. I said, the way you looked at him, the way you stopped looking at me. She took a shaky, ragged breath. This isn't fair. No, I said, standing slowly, rising above her. What's not fair is how you turned this marriage into a performance. Smiling over dinner while lying through your teeth, hiding events, dodging questions, leaving me in the dark while you glowed in the spotlight. Tears spilled faster now. Black lines trailed toward her chin. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't. You didn't mean to get caught, I interrupted, the words quiet and precise. That's what you mean. I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect yourself, Ashley. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the edge of the coffee table, shoulders trembling. I didn't love him, she whispered. I paused. And that's supposed to make this easier? She looked up, desperate. I didn't want this to happen. It was just one step at a time, and then I couldn't undo it. You could have told me the truth, I said. I was scared, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Scared of losing everything. I crouched in front of her, close enough for her to see the cold clarity in my eyes. You didn't lose everything, I said. You traded it. You traded our stability for a man with more power, a title, someone who made you feel important. But guess what? He's not going to save you now. Ashley stood too, suddenly breathless. So that's it. You destroy my career and walk away. No, I said. I stopped protecting your lies. That's all. Her eyes darted, frantic. Do you know what this will do to me? I'll lose my job, my reputation, my friends. You already lost me, I said. She froze. I walked past her toward the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, like we hadn't just torn open a 5-year marriage in 5 minutes. She followed. You can't just pretend you're innocent in all this. I turned, took a slow sip of the cold water. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't drag someone else into my boss's bed to climb a ladder I couldn't earn. She flinched like I'd struck her. Silence filled the space between us. You're not a victim, Ashley, I said, the word soft but lethal. You're just finally caught. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in months, she had no story to spin, no version of events that could bend the truth back in her favor. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was finished. I had found the niche of truth, and now I was finally free. The chaos of the confrontation faded quickly, replaced by a devastating silence. Ashley left the very next morning. No second fight, no tearful apology. She hired a team to pack her things, and by noon, the apartment was scrubbed clean of her presence. The quiet that descended wasn't peaceful at first. It was the sound of a vacuum. Every corner of the apartment that had once been filled with her energy, her plans, and her lives was now just air. It was a terrifying, hollow space. But within days, that fear curdled into profound relief. I was alone, but for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. I was unburdened. The divorce proceedings began immediately. Ashley, true to form, didn't accept defeat quietly. The corporate scandal had already cost her job and her professional reputation. Now, in a cynical act of self-preservation, she tried to leverage the chaos. She filed a lawsuit against the Stratosphere Group for wrongful termination, claiming the investigation that followed Julia's whistleblowing had targeted her unfairly, weaponized gossip, and violated internal due process. It was a desperate, transparent move to reclaim some moral high ground and, more importantly, some financial security. The anchor. I hired a lawyer named Cole. He wasn't a family friend, but an old Army acquaintance. A pragmatic, steady man who specialized in contract law, but had the temperament of an anchor. He cut through Ashley's lawyer's noise with ruthless efficiency. She wants money, Mark, Cole said, sitting in my newly quiet kitchen. The house funds the joint savings. She's claiming marital assets, regardless of her conduct. I used a huge chunk of our savings to hire Vince. I reminded him to investigate the very thing she was hiding. That money was spent pursuing the niche of truth she destroyed. That money is mine. Cole nodded, rubbing his chin. We'll argue that her financial conduct and ethical violations constituted a dissipation of marital assets. The evidence Julia gave us is gold, Mark. It proves a pattern of professional dishonesty that directly conflicts with the trust required in our agreement. The first big moment wasn't our divorce hearing, but the civil trial, Ashley versus Stratosphere Group. I was called as a witness to the defense. The company's lawyers wanted to establish the pattern of her deceit, proving her termination was warranted, and not just a result of gossip. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No gasps, no slamming gavels, just quiet voices, pages turning, and the occasional sigh of lawyers waiting for their billable hours to tick by. Ashley sat 2 rows ahead of me, hair tied back too tightly, wearing a blazer that didn't fit her like it used to. Her posture was still polished, but her hands gave her away, trembling slightly, fingers clenching and unclenching in her lap. When I was called to stand, I felt the familiar, cold clarity I had discovered the night I confronted her. I wasn't angry anymore. I was purely factual. Mr. Layton, her attorney asked, trying to rattle me, do you feel your personal relationship with the plaintiff might be coloring your interpretation of these events? No, I said plainly, looking straight at the defense table. I live them. My observations are based on our own actions. The hidden invitations, the unexplained late nights, the sudden financial distance, and the final, explicit demand that I stay away from the event where she was later seen engaging in unprofessional conduct. I am testifying to fact of observation, not feelings. Ashley didn't look at me once. Not while I testified. Not while the judge read through the firm's HR protocols, or while the legal team laid out the web of promotions, travel records, and overlapping calendar entries between her and Richard that stretched too far be dismissed as coincidence. Julia's brave act of whistleblowing had provided the paper trail to prove the structural niche of deception. The ruling didn't take long. In light of the documentation presented, the judge said, "The court finds no grounds to support a claim of wrongful termination." Ashley barely reacted. No outburst, no tears, just a blink, slow, resigned, as if she'd already known this would happen. The final divorce. The civil loss crushed her attempt at financial leverage. The subsequent divorce proceedings were swift. Cole managed to secure the lion's share of the liquid assets, specifically the savings we had earmarked for the house. For me, the judge cited her egregious conduct and the financial loss incurred, the PI fees, as a compelling reason to ensure my clean break and financial stability. I won. Not just a divorce, but the moral and financial right to start over. Ashley walked out of the courtroom defeated, fading into the crowd without a backward glance. I watched her go, and the feeling was not triumph, but quiet, profound closure. "You're free, Mark," Cole said, slapping me on the shoulder. "And solvent. Now what?" "Now," I said, looking out at the endless movement of the city, "I figure out what I actually want. The niche isn't just truth. It has to be my purpose." In that moment, I realized the power of focused, precise evidence. Vince's external search failed, but Julia's surgical internal exposure succeeded. The concept of finding the exact, specific point of failure, the hidden truth that breaks a structure, that was the key. I went home to the quiet apartment, the space I could finally call mine. And for the first time in months, my mind didn't drift to Amanda, Richard, or Cole. It drifted to the hospital. To the first time I realized my life was based on a lie. And to the one person who had been honest with me during my entire ordeal, the nurse who had cared for me when I was concussed, who saw right through my facade and gave me a moment of genuine human clarity. I needed to find Eliza. She was the one loose thread of honesty I needed to secure before I could truly begin to build my new niche. My proper thank you to Eliza didn't happen right away. I didn't want the hospital to be the backdrop for my new life, and I certainly didn't want her to feel obligated by the context of our patient-nurse relationship. I waited a full week after the court ruling, giving myself time to breathe in the apartment and feel the closure settle. The immense, heavy weight of the past 5 years finally lifted. The apartment was mine now, but it still felt like a stage where a bad play had just concluded. The floor was clean, the scent of Ashley's expensive perfume finally gone, but the air felt thin. I needed to fill it with my intentions. I finally called Eliza on a Friday afternoon. My hands were shaking a little when I dialed the number I'd carefully retrieved from my notes. "Nurse Eliza speaking," she answered, her voice sounding crisp and professional, instantly transporting me back to the sterile white room where I first discovered my life was a lie. "Hey, Eliza," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's Mark, the concussion guy, the one who needed the honest wake-up call." A slight pause, then a quiet, dry chuckle. "Oh, Mark, I was wondering what became of the man who looked like he fought a tractor and lost. You're out of court, I assume?" "Out, legally divorced, and keeping the house funds," I told her, the words feeling huge and heavy, even over phone. "I owe you a decent cup of coffee. One that doesn't smell like hospital disinfectant. Can I buy you one? Just a genuine, out-of-uniform thank you." She hesitated for a moment. "It's not my rule to socialize with former patients, Mark." "I know," I said, "but you were the only friendly face I saw that week. You were my only connection to sanity. And honestly, I wanted you to know that the truth I went looking for, I found it. It worked out. I'm building a new life." She was quiet again, and I could practically hear her debating the decision. "Okay," she finally agreed. "There's a little place near the park. It makes a decent oat milk latte. No scrubs, no charts. Just a thank you. The full story." We met the following Sunday morning. She was wearing faded jeans, a soft gray sweater, and had her hair down, no restrictive ponytail. She looked younger, lighter, and completely different from the efficient, battle-weary nurse I knew. When she saw me, her expression shifted from guarded to genuinely pleased. "You look better," she noted, sliding into the booth across from me. "That's the power of caffeine and the end of litigation," I said, managing a smile that felt real. Over the next hour, I told her everything. Not just the outline she knew from my delirious ramblings, but the raw, messy details. The party, the confirmation from Julia, the PI failure, the corporate whistleblowing, and finally the cold, clinical triumph of the courtroom. I told her how Ashley had tried to leverage the scandal for money, and how Cole had fought back, securing my independence. She listened without interruption, nursing her latte. She didn't offer pity, which I appreciated. She didn't offer advice, which I needed. She just bore witness, offering profound gift of a non-judgmental ear. When I finished, detailing the judge's ruling against Ashley, she looked at me and tapped the rim of her mug. "You know what's interesting?" she asked. "In the hospital, you were physically broken, but you started healing immediately. Your mind was already clear. You weren't fighting for your wife. You were fighting for your self-respect. That's why you won, Mark. You valued the truth more than the marriage." Her observation was simple, but profound. She had named a new niche in my life: integrity and clarity. "You help with that," I admitted. Your sarcasm was surprisingly grounding. It reminded me that the world was still normal, even when mine was burning down. She smiled softly. "Everyone needs an anchor when the tide turns. You just happened to wash up on my shift." The conversation wasn't a date in the traditional sense. There was an ease, a shared history of trauma and recovery, that made the atmosphere comfortable, yet intense. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't grasping for connection. I was just sitting in the presence of genuine, unburdened human warmth. It was intoxicating in its sheer normality. As we parted, she stood on the sidewalk, pulling her sweater tighter around her. "Take it slow, Mark. The adrenaline of the fight is over. Now comes the quiet work." "I know," I said. "The apartment feels like a mausoleum right now, full of ghosts." "Then move," she advised. "Use those house funds you kept. Buy the place with the garage you always wanted. Make it a workshop. Fill it with your stuff, not her ghost. And if you need an opinion on paint colors, you know where to find me. The quiet work. The quiet work." That's exactly what it was. Coming back to the apartment after meeting with Eliza, I felt a renewed, almost surgical focus. The funds I had fought for were now the building blocks of my new life. I immediately began the process of looking for a small house, a place with yard and, critically, a garage. I needed a place to build, literally. I started by tackling the remnants of Ashley's life. I moved through the empty closets, packing up the remaining boxes left for her lawyer to collect. Her expensive corporate planner, the specific coffee mug she liked, the heavy, symbolic beige trench coat, the one she wore the night she walked out. Each item was placed carefully in a box labeled Ashley K. It wasn't angry. It was methodical. I didn't dwell on the memories attached to the items. I only registered the space they were now vacating. I found boxes of my own things shoved into the back of the linen closet. My old army duffel bag, my soldering iron kit, a box of schematic drawings for a hobby project I'd abandoned right after we got married. Every time I pulled one of these forgotten relics out, it felt like retrieving a lost piece of my identity. Why did I stop building things? Because Ashley wanted us to go to rooftop parties, not spend in the garage. I realized that over the decade, I hadn't just compromised. I had actively suppressed my niche to fit into the life she wanted, the one where I was a stable provider for her ambition. The quiet of the empty apartment, which had been deafening the night she left, now began to sound like opportunity. It wasn't the silence of absence. It was a silence of solitude. It was space waiting to be filled by my intentions. The new house search was focused. I wasn't looking for a trophy. I was looking for a functional base camp. I was looking for the physical space that would allow me to define my professional and personal niche, that focused area where my passion and my talent intersected, and build a future around it. The creation was about to begin. Finding the house was less about romance and more about logistics. I wasn't looking for curb appeal. I was looking for a functional capacity. I wanted a place that had no ghosts, only potential. I found it 3 weeks after the divorce was final. A solid, ugly 1950s ranch house nestled on a quiet, unremarkable street. The interior was dated, avocado appliances and peeling wallpaper, but the structure was sound and the backyard was private. Best of all, it had a 2-car detached garage. A big, boxy, no-nonsense space that was perfect for my purpose. I closed on the house quickly, putting the money Ashley had fought so desperately to claim right into the walls and floors of my future. This house was a tangible symbol of my freedom, bought with the clarity of the truth she tried to hide, the foundation of integrity. The first person I brought in wasn't a mover. It was Cole. We sat on dusty buckets in the empty garage, a cold 6-pack of beer between us. The space was enormous, smelling faintly of motor oil and decay, the perfect blank slate. "So, Mark," Cole said, looking around the cracked concrete floor, "I got the paperwork done. The niche security solutions is officially registered, but you need to define the niche. Is this high-end home security, or are we selling video doorbells? I looked at the space, feeling the surge of focused purpose I hadn't felt since before I met Ashley. Neither, I said. We're selling certainty. We're selling the truth. Think about the stratosphere situation. Vince failed because he was looking for a broad, generic truth, clandestine meetings. Julia succeeded because she was in the exact spot, focusing on a specific paper trail. That's the niche. I stood up and paced the length of the garage. We're not installing standard cameras. We design bespoke, covert, surgical surveillance solutions. We cater to corporate clients, high-stakes civil litigation, and personal cases where there's suspicion of fraud or ethical malfeasance. We look for the one tiny hidden point of structural failure, the niche, and we exploit it with unassailable, precise evidence. Cole grinned, the lawyer in him lighting up. So, we're not just selling security. We're selling a weapon of clarity. Exactly, I affirmed. Integrity is the product. I learned the hard way that when the truth is hidden, you need dedicated, focused tools to find it. My background is logistics and engineering. I'm going to build those tools. Cole handled the legal and financial backbone, freeing me up to do the physical work. He was the anchor, ensuring my technical vision stayed grounded in commercial reality. The reclaiming, the renovation became my therapy. I stripped the wallpaper, tore up the stained carpets, and learned to patch drywall. The labor was physically exhausting, but mentally cleansing. Every swing of the sledgehammer felt like the final blow against the life I had discarded. The living space was secondary. The garage was paramount. I spent weeks sealing the concrete floor, running dedicated electrical lines, and building custom workbenches. I painted the walls a solid, functional gray, no distracting colors, no ornamentation. I filled the space with high-end, specialized equipment. Oscilloscopes, soldering stations, 3D printers for custom casing design. I was building a laboratory of truth. When the space was finished, it was clean, hyper-organized, and silent. The physical antithesis of the chaotic, superficial corporate world Ashley had embraced. This garage was my sanctuary, my factory, and the beating heart of my new identity. The name, the Niche Security Solutions, wasn't just a business title. It was a personal philosophy. It meant finding my focused area of competence and standing absolutely firm on the principle of honesty within it. The slow burn. In the midst of the sawdust and the wiring, Eliza started to appear. It was gradual, natural, and never rushed. She didn't arrive to help with the heavy lifting. She arrived to anchor the emotional reality. She'd show up unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, bringing coffee and takeout, sometimes sitting on an empty paint bucket while I ran circuits or patched plaster. Our conversations were easy, focused on the present. "You look like a completely different person than the one who was sleeping on a gurney," she commented one afternoon, watching me expertly run a power conduit. That guy was still trying to keep a secret. I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "This guy just likes clean lines and things at work." She never brought up Ashley unless I did. Instead, she talked about her work, the quiet heroism of nursing, the small, specific needs of her patients, the human niche she served. There was a shared respect for integrity in our separate fields. We were two people who understood that the real value in life wasn't found in glamour or big titles, but in focused, honest work. There was a growing intimacy, but it was slow, steady, and built on mutual respect and shared recovery. It wasn't a frantic, demanding passion of a rebound. It was a quiet, comforting knowledge that someone was watching you succeed entirely on your own terms. We weren't replacing the past. We were deliberately building a new future, brick by brick. The affirmation. The first major contract came 6 weeks into the construction. A wealthy client needed an undetectable system to monitor internal employee conduct in a small, high-stakes division, precisely the kind of job that needed the surgical approach of the niche. I looked at the schematics, then out at my meticulously organized garage. The truth that had ruined my past was now the exact, specific service that was funding my future. I realized I wasn't just selling security technology. I was selling the clarity I had fought and paid for. The house was almost finished. The business was launched. I had Cole's pragmatic support and Eliza's quiet, steady presence. The last piece of the puzzle, the final physical closure, was imminent. I just needed to stand on my own reclaimed ground one last time, with the past fully removed, before I could step into the future. The final piece of closure came 2 months after the move, on a crisp, quiet Saturday morning. It was the day the lawyers had finally coordinated for Ashley to retrieve the last of her personal belongings. The final boxes I had packed and stored in the corner of my new, massive garage. I was ready. I was standing in the kitchen, brewing a strong pot of coffee, when the sleek, black rental SUV pulled up the driveway. It wasn't Richard's luxury car, nor was it the vehicle Ashley drove when we were together. It was a nondescript service, paid for by the lawyers. She wasn't driving her own car. The house was silent, save for the low hum of the specialized equipment I had running in the newly fortified basement closet, the silent core of the niche security solutions. The walls were a solid, grounding gray. The windows were uncovered, letting the bright, cold light flood into the simple, intentional space. Every room was functional, built for purpose, not for show. The front door opened, and she walked in, followed by two young movers. Ashley stopped just inside the threshold, her eyes sweeping over the hallway. She looked thin, slightly brittle. She was still dressed impeccably, but the polish felt forced now, lacking the genuine ambition I had once mistaken for confidence. She held a restless, hungry look that spoke of a life that hadn't quite delivered the easy one she'd envisioned. The instant her eyes registered the new color on the walls, the stripped-down masculine furniture, the absence of her decorative clutter, her breath hitched. The quiet of the functional, organized house was louder than any music. "Mark," she said, her voice soft and I remembered, hesitant. "What did you do to the house?" I walked out of the kitchen, holding my mug, steady and unbothered. "I renovated," I said simply. "It's a different house now. I designed it for work." The movers shuffled past her, heading to the garage door, which was open, revealing the brightly lit workspace. Ashley ignored them, her focus entirely on me. She tried the familiar move, that manipulative warmth attempting to bridge the distance. "We need to talk," she murmured, lowering her voice. "About the settlement. I heard about the ruling on the wrongful termination. That judge was completely unfair. You can't honestly want to walk away with nothing after everything we built." I didn't flinch. I just sipped my coffee. "The judge ruled on the evidence you created. I kept the assets. That was the finding of the court, Ashley. It's final. I used that money to build this." She tried the pity plea next. Her eyes welled slightly. "I know I messed up. I know I handled things terribly. But I was so hurt, Mark. You shut me out. I was lonely." She was reaching for the old narrative. The abandoned wife. But the room, the strong, clean scent of the fresh paint and sawdust, the hum of my specialized equipment, it all contradicted her. There was no neglect here, only purpose. "You were lonely," I conceded, my voice flat. "So you found companionship by sacrificing your integrity and our marriage for promotion. You made your choices, Ashley. I made mine." Her attempt at tears dried instantly. She went for the attack, trying to destabilize me one last time. "And look at you. You kept the money, but you're running some pathetic little security operation out of a garage in the suburbs. You think that's a life?" I smiled. It was genuine. It was the smile of a man who knew his value. "Let me show you my pathetic operation," I said, walking toward the garage door. I pushed the heavy door open, revealing the brightly lit, meticulously organized space. It was spotless. The walls were lined with customized components. My specialized tools were neatly racked, and a high-resolution display showed live, encrypted technical data from a prototype I was testing. Ashley gasped. She walked into the garage, taking in the technical complexity, the focused precision. This wasn't a hobby. This was a serious, high-end laboratory. "This is a niche security solutions," I said, my voice firm. "We design bespoke surveillance and security setups. We cater to a specific market that needs surgical, focused solutions. We deliver the truth with maximum discretion." I pointed to the display. "I took the one good idea that came out of your failure, the realization that truth is a precise, specific point, and I built a company around it. You thought I was trying to track you? I'm sorry to say, Ashley, I wasn't even focused on you. You were just a proof of concept for the need for absolute, undeniable clarity. You showed me the exact cost of the lie, and that clarity became my business." The blow landed perfectly. She realized the full scope of her defeat. Her infidelity and corporate ambition had provided the very opportunity and philosophical foundation for my success. "You did this despite me," she accused, her voice trembling with genuine rage now. "No," I corrected, stepping closer. "I did this to find me. You wanted a man who would fit into the life you designed. I wanted purpose. I found it in building things, in solving problems, in integrity. You taught me the value of focus. Ashley, You taught me the value of the niche. The movers pushed the final boxes past us, slamming the rear of the SUV shut. I have to go, she whispered, backing away, realizing she had nothing left to say, nothing left to take. Go, I told her, my voice devoid of emotion. You don't get to disrupt this anymore. Your scene is over. She turned and rushed out of the garage, fleeing the silence and the truth of the new life I had built on the ashes of the old one. The SUV pulled out of the driveway, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel fading to nothing. I closed the garage door, sealing the workspace, sealing the past. That evening, Eliza came over. We were sitting on the newly built porch swing, sturdy, functional, drinking cheap whiskey. The lights of the garage were still on, casting a soft, determined glow through the curtains. So, she prompted, her voice soft. Was it closure? I took her hand. It felt warm, solid, and real in mine. It's over, I said. Completely. She tried to apologize, to manipulate, to negotiate. I felt nothing. She's a memory. She's research material. I looked at her, at the woman who had guided me back to myself without demanding anything in return. I don't need a wife, Eliza, I told her, finally giving voice to the core truth of my rebirth. I need purpose. I need to work, to build, to stay focused on my niche. She squeezed my hand. I don't need a patient, Mark. I need to be a nurse, a friend, and maybe, eventually, a partner to someone who knows exactly who he is. I leaned in and kissed her. It was the first kiss, a gentle, slow connection that tasted like fresh air and shared understanding. It was a kiss that promised no grand rescue, only the possibility of a steady, shared journey. The divorce was not a story of a husband who lost his wife. It was a story of a man who lost his way and found it again, not in the chaos of broken marriage, but in the precision of his own focus. I had found my niche, professionally, in the quiet, focused integrity of my work, and personally, in the steady, honest foundation of my own making. The niche was simply the life that was left when all the clutter, all the lies, and all the distractions were finally stripped away. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever built.